Good morning, Brad Garrett.
Good morning, McGraw.
So Chicago's numbers in murder and crimes being what it is, St. Louis being what it is, are you telling me that Chicago isn't the worst when it comes to violent crimes and murders?
Per capita, that's the key you have to look for, McGraw. Where per capita, you obviously don't have as many people as Chicago or New York or other big places. So your numbers per capita say that you're higher. Like in the early 90s, D.C., which back then had 500,000 people, had almost 500 homicides a year. Not the biggest number, but per capita, the biggest number.
Yeah, but the numbers out of Chicago are staggering, and the numbers out of New York are infinitesimal. How can two of the biggest cities look so different when it comes to violent crime and murder?
Well, I don't know if this is the correct answer, but this is what has been parlayed. That in the 90s, they both had similar homicide rates. And what happened is New York hired more cops. New York implemented stop and frisk. New York was much more aggressive in pulling guns off the street. They have a lot of specialty units to go after different types of violent crime. And Chicago probably did not anything near that. And as their homicide rate went up, their African-American gangs became more, I guess, disintegrated into smaller sub-gangs who then got in fights with each other. There's some belief, McGraw, that a big chunk of these numbers in Chicago are driven by social media, where you and I get into it online, or I, dish you online. So you pick up a gun and drive across to the south side and plug me. And there are a number of these homicides that fit that profile. So, that is a tough thing to try to do something about.
60 Minutes, I don't know if it was a repeat, but the other day I was watching where they did a story about how the number of police officers in Chicago will respond to a 911 call, but will not get out of their car to sort of patrol the streets, and that the stops are down like 80% from years past. They call that the Ferguson effect, and I know a lot of people question it, but that sounds to me like concrete evidence that this Ferguson effect is real.
There's no question in certain cities, and I'm going to guess Chicago is one of them, it is very real. I mean, despite the issues, and I'm not supporting the illegal stop and frisk that some of those stops were in New York. The point being is when you have conversations with people and you have reasonable suspicion that they've got a gun on them, they got drugs on them, whatever, and you do a safety frisk and you find a gun, statistically, you may have stopped a homicide down the road, particularly if you look at the background of the person you just took the gun from. So all of that goes to community policing. It doesn't have to all be negative. But the idea is you've got to have direct contact with the community, both positive and negative. And Chicago now is in this situation where they have had these horrible shootings where the police were clearly, questionably in the wrong. And you add to that all of these homicides where they just then react. And I will tell you, we got into the situation in D.C. in the early 90s where you have so many homicides, you just go from one to the other. The community never heals. There's no sort of social backstopping within the community to help them sort of deal with all of this. And it spirals. And that's exactly what's happening in Chicago.
Here in St. Louis, we had 188 murders in 2015. We had the exact same number in 2016. It's pretty sad to say, Brad Garrett, ABC News crime and terrorism analyst, who is also a former FBI man, either the public says, shrugs and says that's terrible, what's for dinner? The politicians throw their hands up. It doesn't seem like these issues are going to be solved anytime soon.
No, and unfortunately, McGraw, it largely is driven, in my view, by where these homicides occur. I would be willing to bet you could draw me 2 or 3 circles in and around St. Louis and tell me that most of the homicides occur in those 2 or 3 circles. Those communities, tend to be minority, African American, higher unemployment, just a high level of hopelessness. Kids get raised on drugs and guns and gangs, and the spiral starts. And, the rest of us don't live in that environment. And it's like, well, that's not happening next door to me. It is awful, but, I'm still going to go down to Whole Foods and buy lunch today. So there's some of that. I mean, it's not in their face. If you started having homicides like this in the wealthy part of St. Louis, there'd be a different reaction, unfortunately.
Brad Garrett, ABC crime and terrorism analyst. Brad, have a good day. Thanks for checking in.
Okay, McGraw, take care.
726, Big 550, KTR.